Tableau has been around for almost 20 years and is one of the most popular data visualization tools on the market today. So it's no surprise that Tableau users want to make it easier to model their data using the TimeXtender Data Estate Builder. Well, TimeXtender makes it super easy to integrate your data with Tableau using the semantic models and the Tableau endpoint. TimeXtender integrates with Tableau using the TDS file. This is short for Tableau Data Source. This file contains only metadata, so none of the values are extracted and placed into this file. It contains things like the connection type, the server name, database name, the authentication type, any tables and fields that are involved, whether the fields are hidden, custom measures, custom dimensions, things like that can all be placed into this Tableau data source file. So I'll show you how to create that into TimeXtender and then open that up in Tableau. There are many other data file types as well for Tableau. We're not going to be going into those today. TimeXtender doesn't really support those, but if you are interested, you can pause the video and read to learn a little bit more about those different file types. So in this episode today, we're going to go through creating an endpoint, opening the TDS file in Tableau, reviewing the Tableau data source, the different connection types and why you want to use the live connection over an extract, the different supported features, so what types of parts are brought in using this TDS file, also replacing the data source and why you might want to do that, and then how to publish a Tableau data source to Tableau server. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So I'm going to open up TimeXtender, and here you can see I do have a small project, small data warehouse already built up. I do also have a semantic model already created. Now, first things first, you want to understand, let's take a look at my data warehouse. And you can see in here, if I edit this data warehouse, we can see the server name, the database name, and the authentication type. Well, when TimeXtender creates this Tableau endpoint and hands this information over to Tableau, this is where it's getting that information. So it's very important that you place in here a server name that can be used anywhere else you might be using Tableau, because when Tableau attempts to connect to the server, it's going to use this server name. So you'll want to ensure you're using fully qualified names or the IP address if you have that. On the right, you'll see my sales semantic model. So I have a few tables already in here, a customer dimension, a date dimension, products dimension, and a sales transactions fact table. One of the really nice things about TimeXtender semantic models is if I want to take this model, let's say, and bring it out to analysis services or then bring it out to a Tableau, I don't have to go and rebuild the model. I simply right click here and I add the endpoint that I want to bring this model to. I don't have to change the model to make it work for another endpoint. If I'm already pushing this model out, let's say to analysis services, I can simply go in and add a Tableau endpoint, and that will allow me to work with both at the same time. But since in this video we're just going to be looking at Tableau, I'm going to go ahead and disable these two settings, and this way it'll only show me the settings in the semantic models that are supported by the Tableau endpoint. Okay, so I'm going to go through and I want to add a few of the different features that are supported by the Tableau endpoint and show you how they work in Tableau. Let's start with a custom measure. If you notice in this table, I have quantity and unit price. But let's say I want to show the full sales amount in my model as well. So I'll add a custom measure here, and let's name this sales amount. You want to be sure to define the data type. In this case, I'm going to use decimal. And of course, my formula is going to be quantity multiplied by unit price. Bring those in, and just like everywhere else in TimeXtender where you're scripting, we're going to be able to support these parameters. That means if any field names change or table names change, TimeXtender will update these scripts for you automatically, so they will continue to work even as your data warehouse changes. It'll also have full support for version control. So you can go back to any previous version of your script as it might change or evolve, and you can see those previous versions and roll back if you need to. All right, so I have that custom measure in place. Let's look at a couple of other things here. I do have a product dimension. We see here I have product name, standard cost, and weight. Well, I don't have the unit of measure here. So I have a weight, but I'm not really sure what that unit of measure is going to be. I know in this case it's going to be pounds. So what I can do is I can add a custom field here instead of a custom measure. And I'll call this unit of measure. And in this case, the data type is text. And I want to say this is pounds. Okay, that's going to be pounds there. Click OK. And that's going to give me my custom field, or in this case, when it's brought into Tableau, it's going to be a custom dimension. All right, I also have here an order date dimension. But let's say I want to add a hierarchy. I want full support for hierarchies there inside of Tableau. So I can go in here and add a hierarchy from TimeXtender. So in here, I'll go in and I'll add year, I will add quarter, month, and then date. So I'll have that hierarchy in there, and it'll bring in that hierarchy. You can see hierarchy, order, date. So that'll show up as a hierarchy in Tableau. That'll be really nice. Okay, I've added a few functionalities here in my semantic model. I want to go ahead and bring this out to Tableau. So we right-click on endpoints and click Add Tableau Endpoint. In this case, I just want to call this Tableau. This is just a friendly name here for me, so I'll know because this is under endpoints, it's going to be my Tableau endpoint. And here is where do I want to create that Tableau TDS file. In this case, I want to call this sales. I know this is a Tableau TDS file because of the file type, so I'll name this sales in this case. The view schema. So what TimeXtender is going to do is when it creates this endpoint, it's going to create a set of views in the database. And we'll go ahead and open up Management Studio, and I'll show you what those views look like once we deploy the model. But you can place those views inside a separate schema in the database. In this case, we'll create a schema called sales. We'll put that in the sales schema. We can also postfix these views with a little underscore and then whatever string or characters you want to put in here. I'll go ahead and skip that step for now. But let's click OK. I've added my endpoint, and now let's go ahead and deploy the model. This is going to do a couple things. First of all, it's going to ask me to save my project as usual. But it's going to deploy those views inside the database, number one, and number two, it's going to create that TDS file for me in my file system where I designated that file should go. So this is going to, as I mentioned, it's going to create those views for me as well as the TDS file. All right, now it's saving my project to the project repository. Again, this is going to allow me to roll back at any point in time as I might need to do that. Okay, so now that that's done, there's a couple different ways that I can actually go in and open this TDS file. Okay, I can open it up in File Explorer. I can open up in Tableau and go to More. And find that Tableau file. Let's see, where is this? In my C drive, reports, Tableau, and I have that file. I can open that up right here. And another nice way to do it is actually just within TimeXtender, you can right click on the endpoint and open file sales.tds. Okay, so that opened up Tableau. And you can see here, if you click down at the bottom and click on data source, we can actually take a look at what was brought in that TDS file. First of all, we can see our connection here, Microsoft SQL Server. If we look at that connection, we'll see inside of that connection, we have the server name, as I showed you before, the database name, and the authentication. As a reminder, it's pulling all of that information from this connection here. So if your server name is unqualified, maybe it's using localhost or something like that, Tableau might have a hard time connecting to your data because it might not be on the same server. So pay attention to that connection there. Make sure your database connection will allow for connection from an external server. Okay, back in Tableau, we have our SQL Server connection, and we have a list in here. So this is just a list into the data, but it's looking at views in the database. Let's take a look inside of Management Studio at the database so we can see where that data is actually coming from. So here I am in Management Studio. I can expand my database and go into views, and we'll see in here we created that new schema, sales, and we see these additional views being created for us. Of course, we can access these views from any visualization tool. We can query them directly if we want to, but this is what the TDS file is going to point Tableau to, so Tableau has as easy access as possible into that file. If we're doing any aliasing inside of TimeXtender in the semantic model, that's going to happen in the view. So let's look into here. As you can see, if we double click here on migrated data, we can see that it identified these different tables that are in my model. It also has the relations built in for me. Again, that's all defined in the model, which allows me to bring that data into Tableau very quickly, very easily. So here we can even browse through our data, and we can see if it created my measures for me. As you can see here, my custom measure is there. The calculations are working correctly, and then my custom dimension or my custom field is also there. I specified that would be pounds, and you can see all the way down that is pounds. There's also a few fields here that are not showing up, and that's of course going to be those hidden fields. We can click on Show Hidden Fields there, and we can take a look at those, and we can see those fields are hidden away properly there in Tableau. All right, let's take a look at some additional things here, and we can use some of this data to build some worksheets. As you can see, I have my unit of measure right there. I also have that hierarchy that I built using the semantic model. Let's take a look at a list of our products. Okay, so we'll have here product name. I want to use that. I also want to look at the product weight, and of course I want to know what the unit of measure is. So we can take a look at that. We can see that nicely there. That is the data that we put together in the products table, brought out nicely here in Tableau. Let's create another sheet, and in this sheet I want to use the sales amount that I created. So I'm going to double click on sales amount, and I also want to use the hierarchy, the order date. So let's put this in here. I actually want to clear this out. I want to use this one. We'll bring this over into rows, okay, and then use that sales amount there. So now we have by year what our sales are. We can expand that again because this is a hierarchy. We can see this in greater detail. We can also view this as a bar chart if we want to. All right, we can see that nice visualization there. But let's say we want to compare year over year what our sales are. With this being a hierarchy all split out like this, we can actually just drop this up over there, and now we have that nice comparison. I also want to see my labels, so let's add those in. So really nice to the detail comparison there of year over year sales. But we notice here a couple things that we want to change. In here we have 2018. Well, there isn't a whole lot of data in there. We want to, let's go ahead and exclude that from our semantic model. We don't have very much data in there. We can just pull that out. We also, if we look at our other sheet, we realize this is pounds, but we get a request from the business that says we want to refer to this not as pounds, but as LBS. Now we could go in here and we can go to edit, And we could make the changes right here, but we're not going to have version control. We're not going to be able to maintain that because we're not making those changes in TimeXtender. It's better that we make those changes in TimeXtender. So let's take a look at how we'll do that. I'll open up TimeXtender and I'll go in here to unit of measure, and I want to edit that custom field. We'll just change this very quickly to LBS. Click OK. And I also want to filter my sales transactions. So I'll right click and add a data selection rule. On order date, I will say is greater than 2018-12-31. So greater than the last day of 2018. And I'll add in that data selection rule. So I've made these changes here. I'm going to go ahead and deploy those changes in TimeXtender. Again, this is going to save my changes, so now I'll have full version control. I'll be able to look back at previous versions, still maintaining all of that data lineage. So that's going to be really nice to keep those changes there in TimeXtender. So if we want to bring those changes now into Tableau, we can do a couple things. So let's see first here, I'll hit refresh. So we'll just refresh that data source and let's see what we can see. Now we'll notice that pounds did not change. And that's because those calculations are built into the TDS file. It's not actually pointing at the new TDS file yet. However, if we look here, we see that our filter did work. And that's because the filtering or the data selection rules are done in the views themselves. So TimeXtender updated that view. Tableau is able to see that, but it's not yet using the new version of the TDS file. How do we use that new version? Well, let's go to File, Open, and we simply just open that new TDS file. Remember, I saved it in here. Sales, that's the one. We'll open that up. And once that opens up, you'll see I have two versions of the data source. Well, I only want one version. So what I have to do is I have to replace it. I find my active data source, right-click it, and I click on Replace Data Source. You can see current and the replacement. I'll click OK. That'll replace that data source right there, and then I can remove the old data source or close it. So I'll close that data source. Now I've replaced the data source. If we take a look back here, we refresh that and my new calculated field is brought in very nicely for me. So that's how to bring changes from your Tableau endpoint into Tableau. And finally, when we're ready to publish, we can publish these to Tableau Server. I'm using here Tableau Online. The same features and functions work with Tableau Server. But before we get into this, I wanted to talk real quickly about the data source connection. So in Tableau, there's a couple of different settings here for the connection. There's a live connection and there's an extract connection. So the live connection is not going to be quite as good of performance in the dashboard, but it will allow you to pass through your SQL Server permissions and credentials. So as long as users have a user built up in SQL Server with permissions, those permissions will pass through Tableau, and you can handle all of your security and your permissions in the SQL database. But the performance won't be as good. So with smaller data sets that need security, this is a great approach. However, what Tableau recommends is using the extract option for better performance. This is going to bring all the data into what's called a hyperfile, and it's going to save that in the hyperfile. This is more of an in-memory type of data model. It's going to be much more performant for Tableau. So finally, I want to go to Server, and I want to Publish, but I can go here and open up that workbook. Let's switch back to live just for now. Okay, let's go to Server, and we want to publish the workbook. So we give it a project, a name. In this case, we'll just we'll call it TX Sales Demo. All right. And you can see it's also going to publish that data set or the data source, which is embedded in the workbook. I click Publish. It's going to connect to my Tableau Online account in this case. Again, the steps are the same if you're using a local Tableau server installation as well. Now, the important thing to understand, if you're using an extract and if you're publishing to Tableau Online, you can see it's creating that extract for me, bringing that all into my Tableau Online account. The permissions and security is not going to be brought with it, right? Because the extract has to have that row level data. So the important thing here is if you're publishing to Tableau and you're using an extract, you need to handle all of your security and your permissions in Tableau Server. And I'll show you how to do that here. And you can see that's loaded now. Publishing complete. I have my TX Sales demo. I have this sheet right here. That's very nice. Okay, that has my the custom field that I created there. And I also have this sheet, this nice bar chart where I can compare year-over-year sales. It's excluded that 2018. And then if I want to adjust permissions and adjust who has access to what data, I right-click on the sheet and I go to permissions. And then in here we can define groups, we can define users and select which users have access to what areas of the data, what rows of the data, and we can go in, we can configure that all here in Tableau. Okay, that's just about it for the Tableau endpoint and how to connect the TimeXtender Data Estate Builder to visualize that data in Tableau. Thanks so much.